All right, I'm going to start with a big picture kind of question. It's not really my thing, but I think it's a pretty good intro. What do you think of when you hear the words mental health? Some of you might be thinking about mental illnesses. You might be thinking about someone that you care about that has struggled or is struggling. Or you might be thinking about really amazing initiatives like Bell Let's Talk Day and Kids Help Phone. But me, I think about it a little bit differently. I think about it in terms of why we need those initiatives in the first place. I think about why there's an ongoing movement to combat what is a national mental health crisis. I think about the fact that suicide is the #1 health-related cause of death for people my age. More than cancer, more than heart disease, more than any other illness you can think of, it was suicide that took the largest number of Canadian lives from their families last year. If that's not terrifying, I really don't know what is. But unfortunately, when I think of mental health, I have to think of youth, both for positive and negative reasons. But firstly, in that it disproportionately affects me and my peers. The suicide statistic is just one of many. Clearly, we need to make a change, but we can't really do that with how it's set up right now. Mental health is still shrouded in stigma, it's hidden, and people are scared of it. And personally, I never learned anything about it until I was much older, and I don't feel like that was abnormal. In fact, I didn't learn anything about mental health until its consequences were forced into my life. When I got into high school was the first time I ever really had to think about it. Not because it was being taught in my classes, but because of the people around me. See, I'm pretty quiet, and I was a pretty awkward high schooler. So in my group of friends, I ended up being the good listener because I didn't talk a lot. It's pretty easy that way. I got to feel really important because people came to me with their problems, but they were little initially. They were petty fights with their parents, stupid school drama, manageable things that I felt I could fix and I could solve and everything would be great. Until the problems started getting a lot more difficult to deal with. Eventually, the problems became more about feelings that I couldn't rationalize or fix or understand. My friends were coming to me with issues of feeling extreme sadness, of exhaustion, of feeling like they couldn't get out of bed in the morning or like they didn't want to anymore. This wasn't something a 16-year-old me could deal with. I had no training, I had no knowledge to work with. And I got overwhelmed really quickly. I felt like everyone was sinking around me, and I stretched myself out so that they could hold on to me. I thought it was normal that I was staying up late to talk friends down from hurting themselves, and I thought it was normal that I was spending more time checking in on people I was worried about than doing my own homework at 16. I wanted to help, so I took on the role of a good listener and saw it as my job. And I didn't see that me trying to help was actually hurting everyone involved, including myself. But honestly, my breaking point didn't really come until the summer before my senior year. See, I'd been up the night before talking down my best friend, and it had become normal to me in some ridiculous sense now. And I got to bed thinking everything was okay, and then I woke up. I woke up to a text from my best friend's mother, which is not something that was normal, and I could feel that something was wrong, and I didn't know why. As it turned out, after I had gone to sleep that night, my best friend had tried to kill herself. Her family had found her, and they brought her to the hospital, and they, in the mess of panic and confusion and devastation they must have felt, had found the time to contact me because they honestly weren't sure that she was going to be okay. And I cannot put into words the amount of devastation I felt that morning, that day. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't tell my parents right away because I didn't want it to be real. If I said it out loud, I'd have to deal with it. And I was a listener, I wasn't a talker. So I didn't. I isolated myself for the rest of the day and tried to think about anything but what my best friend's funeral might be like. Today, my best friend is okay. I thought I should let you know that. It's been 5 years and we've both grown up a lot, and She got the help that she needed. She got treatment, she is in recovery, and she's still around when I go home so that we can go on weird late night walks by the ocean, get Starbucks together, all things that I would have missed out on otherwise. She and this experience are the reason I got into mental health advocacy in the first place. See, the only problem with becoming an advocate and something you don't really know very well is that it's kind of hard to talk about something you don't know. And I didn't really have a background in this. My school education never gave me any information there, so I had to seek it out on my own. But that required an understanding that I needed to know more before I could even think about talking about this. So I learned. I researched, I went to different organizations, and I tried to learn everything I could. And some of the first things I learned were what mental health is, who it affects, and some of the statistics surrounding it in Canada. So I'm going to run down a few basics here. First thing is that mental health is made up of our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. It affects absolutely everyone. So everyone in this room right now, you all have mental health. It's just how you take care of it. And with us all having mental health, we can find ourselves anywhere on a spectrum from healthy all the way over to crisis. We can find ourselves anywhere in between day to day. The problem is, it operates a lot like physical health, but we don't talk about it the same way. A big part of that is stigma. It's a word I used in my introduction there. But what it refers to is a collection of negative attitudes and beliefs around mental health that shroud mental health in silence and secrecy and shame, and it stops people from reaching out. In fact, even though 1 in 5 Canadians every year will struggle with their mental health, 3 in 4, 75% of those people that struggle, they don't get the help that they need. 3 in 4 people that need help won't get it. If that sounds scary to you, upsetting, it really did to me too. It kind of shocked me into reality. And I knew I had to do something. I knew I had to find a way to make concrete change. The first way I tried to do this was to get involved locally. I grew up in Nova Scotia, and I got involved with the Mental Health Foundation of Nova Scotia. First through a project where I raised money for them, and then later on in the year, I had the opportunity to perform at one of their benefit concerts with my choir. And this was really great. I felt like I was doing something, I knew I was making a difference, but it didn't feel like it was enough because I felt like I was just sitting back. I was passive. I wasn't actively making a difference yet. I wasn't an advocate. So I needed more skills, and that's when bishops came into play. In my first year, I was lucky enough to be one of the students chosen to attend the annual leadership retreat. Unfortunately, that year, we actually focused on leadership skills and advocacy through looking at our personalities and our strengths. And that conference was actually the first time I learned that I was an introvert. I don't know if you can see it right now because I'm doing a very scary thing, but I'm an introvert through and through, and this was the first time I'd heard that introverts could be leaders, that we didn't have to sit in the corner and not talk to anyone, that we could be up in front of crowds as well. And see, the thing is, I'd spent years perfecting my extrovert act. If you're an introvert, you might recognize this. I keep an extrovert cap kind of just in my back pocket. Has a very bubbly personality, an outgoing tone. I'd wear it whenever I had to perform or put on a show. And then I'd take it off at the end and actually go back to my real personality. And through this conference, I learned that I didn't have to do that anymore. Introverts constantly feel like we aren't welcome to be leaders because some of us shy away from taking center stage. But truthfully, introverts can find themselves at center stage for different reasons. I'm not here because it's within my comfort zone, but I'm here because it's something I'm passionate about. And beyond that, some of the weaknesses that we might think we have are actually strengths. My appreciation for solitude actually fuels my creativity, and my need to think and plan before I say something allows me to come up with more clear and powerful messages. Of course, this is still terrifying, but it's something that you work on over time. So with that, I have to come to the biggest strength I've found in introversion, especially mental health, is our ability to listen. I mentioned listening at the beginning as a negative, But honestly, it is crucial in mental health advocacy and any kind of advocacy, because advocacy is shaped around supporting. You are representing a community. You are trying to do right by them. You are advocating for change for them. The work that you do is not about you as an advocate. And the only way that you can make sure that that happens is if you're listening in the first place. If you're meeting with your community, finding out what they need from you, and trying to find ways to let their voices permeate your work. In mental health advocacy, I've seen this in some of the most meaningful mental health conversations I've ever had, because those are the ones where I haven't had to speak a word. I've only had to listen, and I've learned so much. Knowing that I had all these skills instilled me with the confidence to start making change in my community. 3 years ago, back in my first year after this leadership summit, a small group of students and I actually formed the first mental health advocacy group on the Bishop's campus, which is our Jack.org U Bishops chapter. We focus on advocacy through education and awareness, and we host events to help students become more familiar. We're seeking to normalize mental health on campus, and I believe we started to do it. We work year-round to try to find ways to increase comfort level with mental health, and some of our events have actually become part of campus culture over time. More independently, over the past few years, I've become a trained and certified mental health speaker for high school students, which is pretty amazing. And then I've also had the chance to represent bishops at a national mental health conference, the Jack.org Summit. There, we met in Toronto, 200 students from every province and territory from across Canada, and we talked about what was happening in our communities. For here, I talked about the fact that English resources are sometimes hard to find off campus, but in different communities, there were different problems. So we had to come together to try to figure out goals that we wanted to meet. One of them was to push our universities to do better. And one of the ways that we decided we wanted to do this back last year was to create a national ranking of mental health resources at universities. And we actually accomplished this in McLean's in the same year, which is a huge achievement for us. It felt like really small steps, but it was towards a huge goal. And see, the reason we could put all those small steps together is because mental health advocacy is really, really diverse. We come from all different walks of life, from different places, different identities, and different experiences. But what you might find in common when you're looking at mental health advocacy is that it's often youth-driven. See, we talk about the power of youth a lot, but historically we can see it a lot clearer. Social change has always been driven by young people. If you look back to who fought for different rights, we fought for LGBTQ rights, civil rights, for the environment, for feminism. We have fought in every century for something different to keep moving forward, and we're doing it in mental health right now. Before Rosa Parks, there was Claudette Colvin, who also refused to give up her seat on the bus as a 15-year-old. But the thing we have to acknowledge as youth in this movement is that it's not entirely our work. We are lucky enough that we got to build upon the work that has been done before us, the fights and struggles that have been had before us. We aren't the first generation to struggle, but we are one of the first to actually have the language, the resources, and the knowledge to make a difference, to apply, and we are not going to give up that opportunity. Simply put, we are backed by generations of people who've put effort in, and we won't accept the status quo anymore. Just last year, mental health advocates actually created more than 150 million media impressions. We started over 500 media stories, and we sparked at least 140,000 meaningful mental health conversations across Canada. See, mental health is becoming normalized over time. We're talking about it more. This year's Bell Let's Talk Day had a record number of interactions. We're getting there. Governments and institutions are beginning to make mental health a priority because Canadians are beginning to make it a priority themselves. A lot of this has to do with the work of mental health advocates. The mental health landscape in Canada is changing. Slowly but surely, it is something we've worked towards. But the crisis isn't over yet, and mental health advocates like myself are just getting started. Thank you.